Vera sat in front of the mirror, her hands resting on her lap. She wore a heavy silver dress, decorated with jewels and shining threads. Alien flowers were woven into her long black hair. Her eyes, a soft shade of violet, were wide with fear. The room was quiet, but her heart was loud, beating fast like a drum. Today was the wedding. Not the kind with love, not the kind with choice. It was a forced bond decided by her family and the warlord who ruled their region. The warlord was twice her age, with a cruel face and hands that crushed anything soft. Once married, Vera would become his property. She would lose her name, her freedom, and even her voice. There was a soft knock on the door. Her mother entered. "Looking tired, you must obey," she whispered. "It is tradition." Vera didn't reply. She only nodded, but inside, something burned. A voice whispered, "Run." When the sun touched the mountain and shadows grew long, the wedding was to begin. The guests would gather, and the seal would be placed on her wrist. That seal would bind her life to the warlords forever. But Vera had a plan, a small one, a dangerous one. Under her dress, tied to her thigh, was a thin blade, sharp and hidden. And under the floorboard near her bed was a cloak, a crystal light, and a stolen map. When the maid left and the hallway was empty, Vera stood silently. She took off the heavy jewelry and replaced the dress with a black travel outfit. Her heart pounded as she wrapped the cloak around her shoulders. She took the map and pressed the light crystal to her palm. It glowed softly, guiding her way. She stepped out into the cold hallway. Her bare feet made no sound on the smooth stone floor. She moved like a shadow, slipping past guards and through secret doors. She had studied the map every night for a month. She knew which halls to avoid, which doors stayed unlocked. But fate was watching. At the garden gate, a soldier stood unexpectedly. Vera froze, heart jumping. He turned, his eyes narrowing. "Stop." He shouted. Vera ran, cloak flying behind her like a wing. Alarms began to ring across the estate. Guards shouted. Lights turned red. She sprinted across the gardens, through trees that glowed blue in the night. The map led her toward the forest path toward the city border and the transport hub. If she reached it, she could vanish into the stars, but she had little time and many were chasing. Branches cut her face as she ran, but she didn't stop. Pain meant she was still free. She heard footsteps behind her fast, angry, getting closer. Then came the sound of hoverbikes slicing through the air above. She had to hide. Vera dove into a ditch. Her breath shaking, she waited as the bikes flew past. The sound of their engines fading. Then she crawled out and kept moving. Her legs ached, her lungs burned, but she didn't stop. Finally, after hours of running, she reached the dusty road leading to the city. Lights glowed in the distance. Her body wanted to collapse, but her soul kept her standing. She stepped onto the road, looking for any vehicle, anything with wheels or wings. That's when she saw it. A strange machine rolling toward her, its lights blinking like stars. It slowed as it neared, then stopped beside her. The door opened with a hiss, and a voice called out, "You all right?" It was a man, a human. He sat behind the wheel of the ground car, looking at her with curious eyes. He wore a simple jacket and had a kind, tired face. He wasn't from her world, but he didn't look dangerous. She hesitated, her body trembling. Then she whispered, "Please, I need to leave this place." The man looked around, then back at her. He could see the panic, the fear, and something more, desperation. He didn't ask questions. He just reached over and opened the door. "Get in," he said. Vera climbed inside. Her heart still racing. The door closed behind her, and the car sped forward. She looked back through the window. The world she had known was behind her now, burning with lights and anger, and beside her, a stranger who had no reason to help. Yet he did, without knowing who she was. without knowing what trouble she brought. But in that moment, Vera knew her real journey had just begun. The ground car moved fast through the outer roads of the alien city. Lights from the warlord's patrols blinked behind them, but slowly disappeared. Inside the vehicle, the girl sat quietly. Her hands folded in her lap, the human glanced at her from time to time, not speaking. He could feel her fear. It was deep. Not just the fear of being caught, it was the fear of being owned. He cleared his throat and said, "Name's Jack." No reply. "I'm a taxi driver, human zone. Been working on this planet 3 years now." Still silence, the girl finally turned her head, her voice barely a whisper. "My name is Vera." Jack nodded. Not pushing further, she looked so young, maybe 20 in human years. Her violet eyes held pain, but also strength. Jack had picked up strange riders before, but never like this. He felt something in his gut, a warning and a pull, both at once. "You hungry?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She shook her head. He knew she was lying, but didn't press. Instead, he focused on driving. The city's outer ring was dangerous at night, not just because of patrols, but because of creatures, and worse. Vera finally spoke again, her voice broken and soft. "I was to be married today." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Married? To who?" "A warlord," she said. Looking out the window, I ran. "They are hunting me now." Jack sighed. "Yeah, that'll do it." He thought for a moment, then asked, "Why me? Why did you stop my car?" She turned to him slowly. "You weren't afraid." Jack chuckled. "Lady, I've driven through acid storms and gunfire. I've seen it all." Vera gave a small smile. Her first since getting in the car. It faded. "Quickly, they will never stop looking," she whispered. Jack took a turn off the main road, heading toward an old service path. "Where are we going?" Vera asked. "Somewhere safe, for now." He drove them into a small tunnel entrance carved into a canyon wall. Old tech hub, forgotten by most. Perfect for hiding. They parked inside, surrounded by darkness and dust. Jack handed her a protein bar. "Eat," he said. "Even warriors need food." Vera took it and nodded gratefully. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke, just the sound of chewing and quiet breathing. Jack finally asked, "So what's the deal? Why would they force you to marry?" Vera looked down, her voice low. "My family wanted power, and the warlord wanted a symbol." "Symbol? He collects women from powerful houses," she said, her eyes cold. "I would be locked in a golden room, dressed like a jewel, used to show strength." Jack shook his head. "People are sick," he muttered. "Aliens, humans, doesn't matter." He leaned back in his seat and looked up at the roof. "You got anyone else? Anyone who can help you?" "No," she whispered. "I'm alone now." Jack didn't like that. He was just a taxi driver. He didn't do rescues or revolutions, but something about Vera made him feel like this wasn't just a ride. It was something else, something bigger, outside. A faint sound echoed through the tunnel. Jack's eyes narrowed. "Stay in the car," he said, stepping out quietly. He walked toward the entrance and peeked out. A patrol drone floated past the canyon entrance. Scanning with red light, Jack waited until it moved on, then returned to the car. "We've got maybe an hour before they loop back," he said. "We need to move. Where will we go?" Jack started the engine. "I know someone who owes me a favor." As they left the tunnel, Vera looked at him. "Why are you helping me?" Jack thought for a second, then said, "Because you didn't ask for any of this. Because no one else is, and because I've been alone too." She looked at him with soft eyes. No one had ever spoken to her that way before, not without expecting something, not with kindness. As the car drove deeper into the dark paths of the planet, Jack's fingers tightened around the wheel, and Vera's fear slowly started to turn into something new. Not safety, not yet, but hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, She had found more than an escape. She had found someone who saw her as a person, not a prize. The road ahead was cracked and quiet. Old lights flickered on broken poles. Jack drove fast but careful, checking the rear mirror again and again. Vera sat beside him, holding the edge of her seat. She kept her hood low, hiding her face. "Vil?" "Scan the cities," Jack said. "All main roads will be locked down soon." Vera nodded. "They'll use my blood code to track me." Jack looked at her. "You're what now?" She lifted her wrist, showing a faint, glowing mark. "It's a seal. Linked to the warlord's name, they can track me by it." Jack's lips pressed tight. "We'll need to burn it out somehow." Vera's eyes widened in fear, but she said nothing. He took a sharp left turn, leaving the city's edge. The road dipped into rocky hills, where few dared to drive. "This way leads to the tunnels," Jack explained. "Miners built them long ago. Abandoned now. They're not safe. But safer than being seen." As they entered the first tunnel, the light faded. The car's front beams lit up the rough walls and dusty ground. Vera looked around nervously. "It's so quiet here," she whispered. Jack nodded. "That's the good part." Suddenly, the car shook hard crash. They stopped, lights flashing. Red on the dashboard, something hit the wheel. Jack muttered, jumping out to check. Vera stayed inside, heart racing, watching every shadow. Jack came back a minute later, wiping dirt from his hands. "We ran over a spike," he said. "Someone set traps here." Vera's voice trembled. "Do they know we're here?" "Maybe not them," Jack replied. "But someone knows these tunnels aren't empty." He opened the back of the car and pulled out a small tool bag. "Flat tire," he said, kneeling down. "Give me 10 minutes." But just then a sound. Metal clanking, echoing down the tunnel. Vera stepped out, eyes sharp. Someone's coming. Jack stood up, his eyes scanning the dark. From the shadows, 2 figures appeared, wearing old armor, masks glowing faint blue. Not soldiers, but tunnel scavengers. They carried long blades and plasma ropes. One called out, "That's our trap you hit." Jack raised his hands slowly. "We're not looking for trouble," the other one chuckled. "Then you found the wrong place." Vera stepped forward, her voice strong. "We just want to pass." The scavengers laughed. "Pretty one talks well." One said, "What's she worth, you think?" Jack's face turned cold. "Don't finish that sentence," he warned. He stepped between them and Vera. "You'll let us through, or you'll regret it." The scavengers didn't move. Then one drew a small scanner from his belt. It beeped. Near Vera's wrist. "Aha, marriage seal," he sneered. "Royal property," before Jack could move. Vera raised her hand. A burst of light flashed from her palm, blinding the scavengers. Jack grabbed her arm. "Run." They sprinted through the tunnel, leaving the car behind. Their footsteps echoed against the cold stone. Behind them, the scavengers shouted, but didn't follow. The tunnel curved, leading into deeper paths. Breathless, Jack stopped near a small crack in the wall. They slipped through and hid, both panting, covered in dust. Vera leaned against the wall. "I'm sorry." Jack shook his head. "You did great, but we lost the car." Jack smiled. "I hated that car anyway." She laughed softly, just for a second. Then her face turned serious again. She looked at the seal on her wrist, still glowing. "I can't keep running like this," she said. "They'll find me, again and again." Jack thought for a moment. "I know a place. A woman named Sava. She used to work in biomodding. Helps people vanish. Illegal stuff, but safe." Vera looked at him with hope in her eyes. "Can she remove this?" she asked, pointing at the seal. "If anyone can," Jack said, "it's her." They walked through the tunnel for hours. It was cold, dark, and quiet. Vera asked, "Why do you help me?" Jack replied, because I've seen what power does. To good people, you didn't ask to be caught in this." She stared at him for a long moment. "You don't even know me," Jack smiled. "I know enough." Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. Vera stopped. "Do you hear that?" Jack nodded. "Drone, close one." They ducked behind old crates, barely breathing. A patrol drone flew past above, its red beam scanning the ground. It paused, hovered, then moved on. Jack whispered, "We need to go." Now, Vera took his hand without thinking. They ran again, deeper into the unknown, but in that dark tunnel, holding a stranger's hand. She felt something strange in her chest. Not fear this time, but a tiny spark of safety. The tunnels grew colder as Jack and Vera moved deeper. The walls were wet, dripping slowly. And the light from their crystal flickered weakly. Vera's legs ached. Her breath came in short bursts, but she didn't stop. Not when she heard the sound behind them, metal scraping against stone. "They're coming," Jack said in a low voice. Vera turned her head, listening. Yes, and they're fast. They ran deeper into the forgotten mining zone. It was a maze of old tracks and machines, long abandoned by miners. Wires hung from the ceiling like vines, and the air smelled like rust and dust. Jack held her hand tightly as they moved. He didn't let go, even when the tunnel narrowed behind them. The sound of boots and engines echoed. Scavengers had called in backup. Or maybe patrol drones had joined them. Either way, the chase had begun, and there was no turning back. "Do you trust me?" Jack asked suddenly. Vera looked at him, her eyes wide. "I think I already do," she said softly. Jack grinned, then yanked open a side door hidden behind broken pipes. They ducked inside, entering a lower shaft. The floor was steep, slippery, and lit only by red emergency strips. They slid down, their boots skidding across smooth metal. At the bottom, Jack pulled her into the shadows. He whispered. "Wait," voices echoed from above. Flashlights scanned the tunnel walls, but they didn't see the hidden door. The enemies moved past. Shouting orders, then silence returned. Vera's shoulders relaxed, but her hands still shook. Jack noticed and gently touched her arm. "We're okay, for now." She looked at him and nodded, but inside, she knew they were far from safe. They began walking again, slower this time. Jack used his small tracker to find the right path. "Exit tunnels near," he said. "Old worker lift should still function." "Where does it go?" Vera asked. "To the outer canyons." Jack replied, "From there, we reach Sava." But fate was cruel. As they reached the lift, they found it broken. Wires cut, panels open. Jack cursed under his breath. "Someone disabled it," he muttered. "Probably the scavengers." Vera stepped forward, studying the controls. "I can fix this," she said, surprising Jack. "You can?" She nodded. "I studied machines before the marriage talks began." Jack handed her a light and stepped back. "All right, genius, show me what you got." Vera worked fast, hands steady despite her fear. She rewired panels, replaced a fuse. With a spare chip from Jack's pack, minutes passed, then the lift groaned to life. Shaking as it powered on, Jack grinned. "I'm impressed." Vera smiled slightly. "I'm more than a bride." They stepped onto the lift, which began rising slowly through the vertical shaft. As they moved upward, the sound of engines returned. Louder this time, from a side tunnel, a drone flew out, red lights blinking. It scanned the shaft and spotted them. "Hold on." Jack shouted. He pulled his sidearm and fired, hitting the drone's wing. It spun out of control but didn't fall. Instead, it fired back, a blue bolt striking the lift wall. Vera dropped to the floor, covering her head. Jack crouched beside her, shielding her body. Another bolt struck, sparks flying. The drone hovered closer, deadly and silent. Vera looked up, saw its center lens glowing. She reached into her cloak and pulled out her light crystal. It pulsed with power, brighter than before. She stood up, ignoring Jack's shout, and pointed it at the drone. A beam of white energy shot out. It struck the drone directly, shattering its lens. The drone exploded in a flash of blue fire. The lift rocked from the force, but kept moving. Jack grabbed her hand, pulling her down again. "Are you crazy?" he said, breathless. "You could have been killed." Vera stared at her hand, the crystal still glowing softly. "I didn't know it could do that," she whispered, when the lift reached the top. They stepped out into the cool canyon air. Stars filled the sky above, and the desert wind blew softly. Jack looked around, scanning the rocky horizon. "No one here," he said. Good Vera sat on a rock. Breathing deeply, she looked at Jack, her voice soft. "You keep saving me." Jack sat beside her. "You saved me just now." They both laughed, the first real laugh they shared. But before they could rest long, Jack stood up. "We're close to the old outpost," he said. "Sava lives there, hidden behind the cliffs." Vera nodded and stood beside him. "Let's go," she said, "before the next drone finds us." As they walked side by side into the desert night, both of them knew this was no longer a simple escape. It was a fight for freedom. And they weren't running anymore. They were moving forward, together. The stars above the canyon blinked softly. The cold wind brushed against their faces as Jack and Vera followed a narrow path. Rock walls rose high around them, hiding them from the skies. But they knew danger still watched from far above. Every sip, every second mattered. Jack checked his tracker again. "The outpost is near. Maybe 2 more turns." Vera nodded, holding her cloak tighter around her. The desert night was cold, but it was not the cold that bothered her. It was the feeling of being hunted, always hunted, at last. They reached an old iron gate built into the canyon wall. It looked broken and abandoned, rust covering every edge. Jack knocked 3 times, then waited. Nothing. He knocked again, this time adding a sharp rhythm. A moment later, a small camera blinked to life. A robotic voice asked, "Who comes to the broken gate?" Jack stepped forward. "Tell Sava the desert ghost is here." The voice paused, then said, "Wait." Vera looked at Jack, confused. "Desert ghost." Jack shrugged. "Old nickname from when I did things I don't talk about before." She could ask more. The gate creaked open. A tall figure in a red cloak stood on the other side. "Sava," Jack said with a small smile. The woman pulled back her hood, revealing a face half covered in metal. One eye glowed green. The other was sharp and human. "You look older," she said, smirking. "You look the same," Jack replied. Sava turned her gaze to Vera. "And who's this?" "She's the reason I'm here," Jack said. "She needs help. Serious help." Sava led them through a hidden passage, into a shelter built inside the cliffs. The walls were lined with machines, screens, and shelves of strange tech. Vera had never seen such a place. It felt like stepping into another world. Sava pointed to a bench. "Sit. Tell me everything." Vera sat, her fingers playing with the edge of her sleeve. She told Sava about the forced marriage, the seal on her wrist, the chase through the tunnels. When she finished, Sava nodded slowly. "That seal is bio-ink, deep in the skin, not easy to remove. Can you do it?" Jack asked. Sava leaned back. "Yes, but it'll hurt, and I'll need time." Vera stood, stepping forward. "I'm not afraid of pain," she said. "I just want it gone." Siva smiled slightly. "Good. I like you." She brought out a small machine with a blinking needle and humming wires. Jack stood beside Vera as she laid her arm on the table. "Hold still," Sava said. "This will feel like fire." The needle touched her skin. Vera gasped, her teeth clenched. The light from the seal flickered, then dimmed. Pain shot through her arm, but she didn't move. Jack held her free hand tightly, whispering, "You're doing great." After long minutes, the machine beeped. Sava wiped the blood and looked at the wrist. "It's done," she said. No more tracking, no more mark. Vera stared at her arm, now raw but clean. Tears filled her eyes. Not from pain, but from freedom. She turned to Jack, whispering, "Thank you." Sava gave them a small room to rest. It had 2 beds, a light crystal, and a closed door. Jack sat on the edge of one bed, rubbing his neck. "Long night," he said. Vera sat across from him, watching him quietly. "You've risked everything for me," she said. Jack looked at her. "Yeah, maybe I'm crazy." She smiled. "Maybe you have a heart." They sat in silence for a while, then Vera asked, "Why did you come to this planet?" Jack leaned back, thinking. "Lost someone," he said finally. "My brother, in a raid, back on Earth. I left to forget. To run, I guess." Vera reached out and touched his hand. "You didn't run tonight." Jack looked at her eyes. "Soft? No," he whispered. "Not this time." Suddenly, the room lights blinked. A warning alarm echoed through the shelter. Jack stood up fast, pulling his weapon. Sava's voice came through the intercom. "Someone's outside. Heavy ships." "They've found us." Vera's heart pounded. "How?" "The seal is gone," Sava answered. "They must have tracked the explosion back in the tunnels. Or maybe someone betrayed us." Jack looked at Vera. "No more hiding," he said. "We make a stand." Vera nodded, eyes fierce. "I'm done." Running, Sava opened a secret passage. "There's a back exit, leads to the high ridge. But you'll need to fight to reach it." Jack grinned. "Wouldn't be fun otherwise." He grabbed a blaster from the wall, tossed one to Vera. She caught it easily. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You ever used one?" Vera checked the power cell smoothly. "Just because they wanted me to be a bride," she said, "doesn't mean I was never trained." Jack laughed, shaking his head. "You're full of surprises." Side by side, they stepped into the dark hallway, not just a girl and a driver anymore, but something more to people who had chosen each other in a world that wanted to keep them apart. And now, they were ready to fight for it. The secret passage was narrow and steep. Cold air rushed through it as Jack and Vera moved quickly. Sava followed behind them, her red cloak flowing like fire in the dark. They could hear the sound of ships landing at the front gate. Engines roared, boots hit the ground. The warlord's forces had arrived. They brought elite hunters. Sava whispered, "Masked ones, no fear, no mercy." Vera tightened her grip on the blaster. Her jaw clenched, but her hands didn't shake. Jack glanced at her and gave a quick nod. "We'll make it through," he said. "I promised you freedom." The tunnel led to a tall ridge above the canyon. From there, they could cross into the no-scan zone, a lawless stretch where satellites didn't work and signals couldn't reach. If they made it, Vera could disappear forever. But first, they had to survive as they reached the top of the ridge. The wind hit them hard. Dust flew across the sky. Like ghosts, far below, dark shapes moved toward Sava's shelter. A dozen soldiers, fully armed, and behind them walked a taller figure in gold armor. The warlord himself. Vera froze, her eyes locked on the figure. "He came," she whispered. "He came for me." Jack raised his blaster, ready to shoot, but Sava held out a hand. "Not yet. They don't see us up here. We move along. The cliff, there's an old glider near the edge. We fly out." They followed the path along the cliff, stones crumbling under their boots. Every step felt like a test. One wrong move, and they would fall into the deep canyon below. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed behind them. A shot from below exploded near the rocks. "They saw us," Jack shouted. They started to run, the glider now their only hope. As they reached the glider pad, Sava entered a code into the control box. The metal wings unfolded with a loud hiss. Jack helped Vera climb into the front seat. Sava stepped back. Handing Jack a small device, "This is your new identity chip," she said. "It'll make you untraceable, new name, new DNA print, fresh start." Jack looked at her. "What about you?" Sava smiled faintly. "I've been hiding all my life. This isn't new." But before Jack could thank her, a hunter landed on the pad behind them. It was fast covered in black armor. Its face hidden, it fired a bolt. Striking Sava in the shoulder, she fell back with a cry. "Go!" She shouted, "Fly now!" Jack spun around and fired back, hitting the hunter in the leg. The machine twitched but didn't fall. It stepped closer, raising its weapon again. That's when Vera stood up in the glider, her eyes glowing faintly. She raised her hand. The light crystal around her neck pulsed bright. A beam of pure energy burst forward, striking the hunter straight in the chest. It flew off the cliff with a scream, vanishing into the canyon. Jack stared at her in shock. "Okay," he said. "That was new." Vera sat back down, breathing hard. "I didn't know I could do that." She whispered, "It's part of me, I think, but hidden." Jack looked at her with new eyes, not just a runaway bride, not just someone he saved. She was something powerful, something rare, and she had chosen him. He started the glider, engines humming. It lifted off just as more hunters reached the pad. Shots flew past them, but they were already gone, up into the wind. Across the night sky, below, the warlord watched with burning eyes. "She will never escape me," he growled, inside the glider. Jack looked over at Vera. She was bleeding from her arm, but smiling. "Did we make it?" she asked. Jack chuckled. "Almost." They crossed into the no-scan zone minutes later. The stars looked clearer here. The air felt lighter. They landed in a hidden grove where old rebels used to camp. Jack helped her down, setting up a fire. With old gear, Vera sat near the flames, watching them dance. She took out the new identity chip and stared at it. "Who am I now?" she asked softly. Jack sat beside her. "Who do you want to be?" She looked at him with soft eyes. "Someone free," she said. "Someone strong, but not alone." He reached out and took her hand. "Then that's who you are." They sat there in silence, the fire warming their faces for the first time. In her life, Vera wasn't running. She was resting, healing, becoming something new. And Jack, he wasn't lost anymore. He had found a purpose in her. Tomorrow would bring danger, maybe even war. But tonight, they had each other and the stars. Above didn't seem so far. The morning sun rose slowly above the Nascan zone. Golden light spilled across the hills and old ruins where Jack and Vera had made camp. The fire had burned out, but its warmth still stayed in the air. Vera sat on a rock, watching the horizon. She held her blaster in one hand and the new identity chip in the other. Behind her, Jack worked on a communicator, trying to contact a smuggler he once knew. "If he answers, we'll have a way off-world," he said. "But it'll take hours." "Maybe more," Vera nodded. "We don't have hours." She was right. The warlord hadn't given up. Last night's escape had wounded his pride. And a man like him would burn half a planet to get back what he believed was his. Just as Jack adjusted the signal dish, they heard it, a loud hum in the distance, growing stronger. Vera stood, eyes narrowing. "That sound," she whispered. "It's his ship." Jack ran to the edge of the hill and looked down. A large golden craft hovered just outside the zone's edge. Too big to scan the area, but close enough to drop ground troops. Moments later, small black pods fell from the ship like raindrops. Dozens of hunters landed across the rocky plain. "He's not just trying to take you back," Jack said. "He's sending a message." Vera looked at him. "Then I'll send one too." She walked toward the open ridge where the wind howled the strongest. Jack followed, unsure of her plan. You don't have to fight him, he said. You're free now. We can run again. Vera turned, her violet eyes calm. If I run, he'll keep chasing. If I stand, others like me will know they can too. Jack looked at her in silence. He saw not the scared girl from before, but a warrior light in her hands and fire in her blood. The hunters closed in, forming a circle at the bottom of the ridge. Then the warlord himself appeared, floating down on a golden lift. His armor glowed with power, and his voice echoed through the canyon. Vera, come to me now, and I will spare the human. She stepped forward, calm and strong. You never owned me, she said loudly. You only thought you did. The warlord's eyes narrowed. You wear no seal, yet you carry the shame of betrayal. I gave your family power. Vera raised her voice. You took my name, my voice, and tried to take my soul. Now, I take them back. The warlord raised his hand, and the hunters moved forward. Jack lifted his blaster, but Vera raised her own hand first. Her crystal glowed brighter than ever. She stepped down the ridge slowly, her cloak flying in the wind. The ground trembled. Beneath her, energy formed in the air, crackling like a storm. The hunters paused, unsure. Even the warlord hesitated. Vera's power exploded in a wave of white light. It knocked the first row of hunters backward, their weapons shorting out. She raised her other hand and aimed her blaster, firing with deadly aim. Jack ran to her side. Covering her with fire from his own weapon, they fought side by side, pushing forward with each blast and burst of energy. The warlord growled and charged forward. Drawing a blade made of pure light, he struck at Vera. But she blocked him with her glowing arm. The blade hissed and sparked. Jack fired a shot that hit the warlord's leg, slowing him. Vera moved fast, slamming her palm against his chest. Her crystal-flared blinding light poured into his armor. It shattered, the warlord falling to his knees. Gasping for air, you were never strong, she said, standing over him. You only stole power from those who couldn't fight. He looked up, his voice weak. I made you. She shook her head. No, she whispered. I made myself. With one final burst of light, she broke the symbol on his chest plate. The control system linked to her seal shattered with it. The warlord collapsed, defeated. The hunters fled, leaderless and broken. The golden ship rose into the sky and vanished without another shot. Vera turned to Jack, who walked up to her slowly. His face was dusty, his arm bruised, but he was smiling. You okay? He asked. She nodded, breathing hard. More than okay. Later that evening, the smuggler finally answered the signal. They had a ship waiting just outside the zone. Jack helped Vera board it, his hand never leaving hers. She held her identity, chipped tightly, her future now her own to choose. As the ship lifted off, she looked down at the world below. A place of pain, yes, but also the place where she found her strength. And found him. Jack sat beside her, smiling softly. So he asked, where to now? Vera leaned against him. Anywhere, as long as I'm not running anymore. The stars welcomed them as the ship flew higher. Not just an escape, but a beginning. A warrior girl and the human who stood beside her. Not bound by chains, but by trust. And in the deep quiet of space, they finally had peace.